It's a privilege and an honor to introduce David Copenhaver. He's been a friend of mine for, I think I was trying to add up the years, David. It's been like 14 years. We used to go to church together. But David Copenhaver is a certified development professional, one of but a handful in the nation. David has been involved in the development, management, and acquisition of commercial real estate for nearly 30 years and has personally been involved in over 80 projects in the greater Pacific Northwest. David's professional accomplishments include over 6 million square feet of retail and office and nearly 1 million multifamily units, several large mixed-use master plan developments, and various business enterprises, including 2 wineries. David currently serves on the board of directors of several nonprofit organizations and has served with numerous community-related committees, commissions, and boards in the management and advisory capacities. David's primary focus remains his family. David currently resides in Clark County and continues to engage himself in local faith-based, professional, and community-focused organizations. David likes skiing, hiking, and kayaking, and he grew up in Bend. Please welcome with me David Copenhaver.
Well, thank you for the ovation. I'm going to beg for your indulgence today because I'm on the tail end of a cold, so if I can get through this, perfect. If not, I may have to hand off to Craig. But in one little, I think there was a typo. I haven't done 1 million units. It was like 1,000 apartment units. So, and now, has there ever been a county more maligned than Clark County? You know, a lot of Portlanders would have you believe that a lot of Clark County people are toothless and, you know, hillbilly and marrying their cousins, and I don't doubt that probably does exist someplace there, but by and large, it's been a really great market for a very long time. Just going to give you a brief history of my involvement. So I was vice president of development at Graymore for 22 years, and then I started my own company about 4 or 5 years ago. And so over the course of my career, I've done over 20 projects in Clark County, all of which have performed amazingly well, and that's over, you know, a 25, 30-year period of time. So I'm kind of high on Vancouver, not necessarily because I live there. I do live there for family reasons and also for the schools and also for tax purposes. But I grew up in Oregon, so I have a fondness for the Portland area, and I've developed, most of my projects have been in the Portland market over the years. But, you know, before I start too much, I want to kind of give you a little history lesson, and people might think, well, why are we here for a history lesson? But I often, when we go into a market, I want to know what makes people tick, and a lot of times that's the history of a community. And, you know, you need to tailor your developments to meet their needs. And so Clark County is kind of unique because for a long time, due to the fact that it's been maligned by the Portland sector, you know, there's this intense pride on Vancouverites, even I think recent transplants. And it's because of the fact that really it all began there. You know, I mean, that's where Lewis and Clark first slept along the banks. That's where Hudson Bay Company built their fort. And Portland wasn't even Stumptown at that point in time, wasn't anybody's radar. And so I'm going to kind of go through this. So just push there. Okay. So this is what Fort Vancouver looked like back in the day. It was called New York of the West. There wasn't anything. I mean, there was no Portland, there was no Oregon City, there was nothing. There was just Vancouver. And so a lot of people take immense pride in that. And Fort Vancouver was built by the Hudson Bay Company. And then over time, it grew into this, and this is kind of the early 1900s Main Street. And now, you know, Captain McLaughlin, that founded Oregon City, came out of Fort Vancouver. The Columbia River was named after a captain and a ship that was out of Fort Vancouver. And the reason I share this because there is an intense pride in Vancouverites as to their history and identity, and kind of being a little offended by the fact that they've always been brushed off as being second. Now, I think what really transpired is after World War II, the city grew from literally 18,000 to 90,000 people because of the Kaiser shipyards. People came in, and so there were a lot of housing that just popped up that, let's call it, you know, entry level at the best. It was just basically shacks. And so I think that's really what began the roots of Vancouver kind of being maybe a second tier or a blue collar community. Well, as time grew, you know, obviously things have progressed there. In 1980, the interchange went in, I-5 went in, or I-205, and so that opened up the East County. And so that opened up incredible growth towards Camas. And then more recently, we've seen a lot of growth through employers that are relocating there because of a lot of tax incentives. And this is what it looks like today. There's been a lot of growth. I'm going to focus most of my my presentation on downtown. I have kind of an affinity for downtown. I think it's an incredible community that's just kind of busting out. And I will talk about the county as a whole, but primarily about downtown. So here's just kind of some statistics, and I had to chuckle over the first presentation. I kind of went, or the slide, I went through it really quickly because my marketing person put in there that's one of the fastest growing counties in Portland. And I had to ask her, it's like, well, there's only 4, so where is it placed in fastest growing? She didn't have an answer for that, so, but it's one of the fastest growing. So anyway, the population of Clark County is nearly 500,000, a lot more than most people think. It has had a 10% growth rate. Matter of fact, Ridgefield, which is a small community that is a little north of downtown Vancouver, was ranked the top growing community in Washington State in terms of percentage. You can see the growth projection is going to be 27%. The unemployment rate is very comparable to Portland. And then also the population of Vancouver, obviously, and I'll get into all the different cities, but Vancouver is by and large the largest. And what's interesting about the makeup of Vancouver, some of you may know this, some of this may be new information to you because you're not that familiar with across the river. But Vancouver from one end to the other is about the same as being from the West Hills to Gresham. So it's very linear, very long, that leads into Camas Washougal. So it kind of divides the community because when you talk about developing in Vancouver, a lot of people think of it just being, you know, a relatively small community like, say, Hillsborough. But in reality, geographically, it's very long, and so you have different things happening on the east than you do from the west. For people that love little charts and tables and graphs, I threw this in. And this kind of just shows the makeup of the different cities. Obviously, Vancouver being number 1, Camas being second, and so on and so forth. I'll go through a little map a little bit later, kind of identify where these communities are and what's happening in those particular communities. So this presentation probably is a little small, and maybe I can point. There's a pointer on this, correct? There's a pointer on, yeah. Ah, there we go. Okay. Well, you'll have to just imagine. So I'll do a depiction. So essentially, this is Clark County, for nearly 500,000 people, and Portland is to the southwest, and then the city of Vancouver is pretty linear, basically from Vancouver Lake on the west or left-hand side over to Camas, which is on the right-hand side. You've got Camas and Washougal off to the east, and then you've got Battleground up kind of center, and then Ridgefield over to the west along the Columbia, and then La Center. And then there's smaller communities like Yakult and Amboy. But those are the primary cities. This kind of shows you the urban growth boundaries too, the white being the urban growth boundaries. Now, the one thing that I will talk about with Vancouver, the one thing that I really like about it is the bones and the infrastructure that a lot of the other counties or jurisdictions within Oregon don't have. And, you know, and we'll get into a lot of the benefits. Some of you already know because I saw some people from the port, and you probably talk about this all the time, is that Vancouver actually has proximity. It has deep water ports. It has close proximity to basically 2 rail lines that come together, converge, go to Seattle, and it is the main line that serves the freight for Seattle. You've got an international airport, and you've got available land, lots of available land. The urban growth boundary was set at a particular point that it allowed a lot of growth, kind of unlike, you know, Portland. And I've developed all over Portland, but obviously a lot of the land is very limited, and so it's going more vertical than it is horizontal. You still have the opportunity to, I wouldn't say urban sprawl, but I would say that you have the opportunity to grow in Clark County. These are some of the top 10 reasons. This is off of CRDC, which is a local group in Vancouver that promotes the city, the county, and recruits employers. And I'll go into some of the major employers that have come into recently. But obviously, it's a favorable business climate. You know, we have the infrastructure costs are in place. The freeways are not at capacity. They still have the availability, and I think I forgot to mention that too. Is there's an interstate, so you've got all four of those things coming, converging, which Wilsonville doesn't have, Hillsborough doesn't have, Gresham doesn't have. Portland's really the only one, and we often liken Vancouver to Portland like Bellevue is to Seattle. And downtown Vancouver has the highest concentration of jobs as far as the downtown core than any other small town associated, kind of affiliated with the Portland Metropolitan, the MSA. Anyway, as you probably know, there's no income tax in Washington, one of the few in the nation. Unfortunately, on the flip side, they don't have tax increment financing. They're only one of two states in the nation that don't have that. But a lot of jurisdictions will start through a state charter. They're able to provide some incentives, maybe usually in impoverished areas or downtown core areas, which is called, there's a long acronym. Basically, I'll just say it's a tax abatement. And it's not a tax deferral. It's not a credit. It is a true tax incentive insofar as like we've got a couple projects in downtown Vancouver where we get no taxes. You have a property tax based just on the value of the land, but nothing on the income, nothing on the improvements for 8 years. And then it's 12 years if you put in an affordable component. So at least they have that, but again, it's not, citywide. It's just primarily in the main core. The affordable housing, relatively so. I just heard someone talk about here in the Portland area that it was about $350 to $450 for a starter home. Clark County, it is still a little bit more affordable, particularly if you get into the Ridgefield and the center markets. So you can probably find something $250 to $350. So we're seeing a lot of millennials move up there. And lease rates, again, are more competitive there. Your land values are considerably less. For example, some of you know, and we develop in the Portland metropolitan area too, and just recently did some things in the Hollywood district on 23rd. In a couple cases, we paid $100 to $150 a square foot for land, and then about $300 in 23rd. Well, likewise, they're about $45 to $75 a square foot in downtown Vancouver. Now, the buzz is out with inclusionary zoning over here. It's kind of forcing people to look beyond Portland, and then also the rent caps. So we're getting a lot of people from the Portland area, a lot of developers, a lot of interest, people looking at Clark County. And I think that's good and bad. I think it's going to kind of be a glut, but we'll address that a little bit later. Cost of living, I don't have any charts here for you, but the cost of living is actually a little better than the Portland market as well. So again, most of these projects that I'm going to talk about are in the downtown core. That's really where things are happening in Vancouver. There are some larger employers that have recently relocated, many of which you're probably familiar with, so I'm preaching to the choir, but I'll just kind of run through them. So Banfield Pet Hospital moved their corporate headquarters out of Portland to eastern Clark County. Peace Health moved down from Bellevue. And then Fisher Investments moved from Palo Alto, and these are high wages, and about 1,800 employees out of Palo Alto to East County as well. And then Far West consolidated their operations. I could go on. So a lot of employers relocating to the Clark County area. Mostly East County because they're still wanting to optimize that parking. Downtown Vancouver is starting to experience a bust with parking, kind of similar to what Portland experienced about 20 some years ago. But right now in Vancouver, parking is only about $75 to $100 a stall. That seems like a dream here, but it's being pushed because more and more people are moving into the downtown core. So they anticipate it'll probably be about 150 to 180 within the next 3 years. So I would be remiss if I didn't talk about our projects first. So this is a project that we have going on Main Street. So Main Street, could you possibly bring up an aerial real quick? So if you're not familiar with downtown Vancouver, there's kind of two areas. Geographically, it's not that large, but you've got Uptown, which is Main Street, that kind of is north of 4th Plain, or Mill Plain. Then you have the downtown core, and that's the more historical aspect. Main Street's kind of becoming kind of a chic little place. It's not 23rd, but it's kind of reminiscent of Division or Alberta or Fremont or even possibly Williams. So this is a piece of property this actually is where Burgerville started. This was the Propstra family farm back in the day, and then it grew into the Holland Creamery, and then Burgerville was hatched on this very property. As a matter of fact, the family, the Propster family, are involved with us in the project. So this is an aerial of downtown Vancouver that Craig has brought up. And again, it has rail, has the river, and has the interstate freeway, and pretty close and accessible to the airport. So as you can see, geographically, it's not that large. If I can get this pointer to, yeah, I'm not getting any luck with the pointer, but.
Probably got a weird angle. Tell me what you want to point, maybe I can get that.
Okay. Are you going to be my Vanna White?
We're getting some down here.
Okay. So if you can kind of point to Mill Plain. So that's Mill Plain, and that's kind of the northern boundary of downtown. And then you've got Interstate 5 alongside the east there. And then you have the kind of the Clark College campus that is in the upper right there. And then just below that, you have the Fort Vancouver, and we'll talk about some things that are happening there too, the Fort Vancouver Trust. And then you have the Port of Vancouver, everything to the west. So geographically, and then uptown is kind of a slice that goes up the middle right there, up to towards Fourth Plain. So anyway, that's that is downtown Vancouver.
Ready for it?
Yeah, and then if I get back to the project, appreciate it. So the first crane that's been in downtown Vancouver in, oh gosh, 20 years was for our project, the Uptown. And the Uptown is 167 units, 8,000 square feet of retail. And what's kind of unique about this is we have ground floor residential on three sides, very Pearl-esque. And so they have stoops and kind of something you'd see in the Pearl with Muse. There's a park out in front of it, and that's on the back side. On this side, we have retail, and we'll have, you know, the Pearl-esque kind of windows that slide open and such. And then we have a rooftop terrace with fire pits and cafe lights and stuff like that. So that one is under construction and will be completed in about 2 months. Then this is our next one that we're doing next to our office building. The building that's adjacent to it is our office building, which was actually the former corporate offices Red Lion Hotels. So we bought it, and it was in disarray, so we basically gutted the entire thing and made a creative space. We were 100% occupied before we even started construction, and we didn't even have to market it. That's how the demand is in downtown Vancouver. And we're getting rates that are about 26, 27 full service. So obviously a lot more affordable than Portland. This one is 125 units. It's kind of unique in that it's right between the two waterfront entrances, and I'll talk about the waterfront in just a moment. I'm sure you've heard about the waterfront to death, but I'm going to kind of reiterate on a few points on that. But anyway, on the ground floor, we have two-story townhomes, and what's unique about that is this is only a couple blocks away from the waterfront park that's going in, but it's also just about a block away from ESTHER Short Park. And the reason ESTHER Short Park is monumental is because it has become like the center of downtown. Up until about 20 years ago, it was an eyesore. I mean, people were accosted, physically, and it was a very dangerous place. The city decided in late 90s to do a redevelopment plan. So what they did is they cleaned up the park. The Angelos built a project. There was Saudi interest that built the Vancouver Center, and then the city decided to build a hotel that they own, the Hilton Hotel. What's interesting about this Hilton, and I've got a lot of data on this because I serve on the CCRA, which oversees it, and the DRA, but it's one of the few hotels that are owned by a city in the state of Washington. And it has turned into one of the top properties for Hilton on the West Coast. Matter of fact, 5th in terms of growth and dollars spent. So it's I still scratch my head, and I don't really understand why people come to downtown Vancouver, but for a hotel. But it's doing very, very well. So, but that core rejuvenated that entire. Lucky Brewery came down, and it just rejuvenated everything. And then ESTHER Short Park was named last year the top one of the top 3 parks in the United States for events because they have concerts in the parks, they have marathons, they have brewfests, they have movies in the park, events that draw thousands and thousands of people. Well, our office is right next to it. This project is literally half a block away. And then you've got Farmers Market, which again, Farmers Market was listed as one of the top farmers markets in the Pacific Northwest last year. And it wraps around the front of this. So people who will be living here basically have the Farmers Market, which is Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, right out inside their front door. Okay, this is, I've got a master plan, and I know you've probably seen a presentation before, but I'll just kind of highlight this. I actually started this project when I was at Graymore, worked on it for 4 years, permitted it, entitled it, bought the land, and so it's kind of near and dear to my heart. And so it's exciting to see a lot of things happening, but it sat pretty dormant through the recession and shortly after, but boy, it's hopping now, and we've got some serious projects. So this is Block 6 that Graymore is doing, and it'll be 6 floors of multifamily on one tower and 6 floors of office on another. The Murdoch Trust, which is a $1 billion philanthropic fund, is locating on 3 floors in the office building. Then the others will be high-scale multifamily units, about 2,500 square feet. And it's alongside, like I said, the 10.5-acre park. The next one is Block 8, and this is by the Olivas. And the Olivas have been an integral part of the Clark County community for a long time. Steve Oliva owned High School Pharmacy, and he sold to Walgreens. But Steve has his fingers in real estate transactions from Lincoln City to Spokane and from Vancouver, BC to Redding, California. And so to have him a part of the Clark County philanthropic scene has been a blessing. And he's been involved in pretty much every large-scale project that's happened. And I think that's given it a boost to have somebody local, high net worth individual participating. So this is Block 8. This will be 7 floors. So retail on the ground floor, and then 6 floors of multifamily above, and 220 units. And again, their rates, just to kind of give you some ideas on rates, our Uptown and our ESTHER will average about $2.15 a square foot. Now that's phenomenal for Vancouver because when we started the Uptown, it was about $1.75. So that's, you've seen that's how much growth has been in the rents. Vacancies down here for multifamily are still less than 3%. They're 2.5%. So, and the Uptown, there's been nothing under construction. The Uptown will be the first one delivered. So this one will probably start construction next year. I failed to mention that Block 6 is currently under construction and should be completed within the year. This is another project that all of us are doing. It's on Jefferson, which is just on the west side of the community, 108 units. This is an office building that Ryan HURLEY is doing, which is just, it's kind of in the shadow of Pearson Air Park, but it's alongside I-5 and part of the downtown next to the Hilton. This will be 6 floors of office, and I understand he's going to be doing a condo project there where he's going to be selling office space. I know a couple people are going in there. Okay, so this is the waterfront project, and you can see that it's massive, and up until recently it probably was viewed by many as a pie-in-the-sky type of dream, but it has come to fruition. The infrastructure is in. The underpasses have been put in under the BNSF Railway, and then the main spine of it has been put in. And then the port has acreage that's immediately to the east of it, and they've since demoed a portion of the former Red Lion Hotel, and they've got plans I'll get into a little bit there. And I'm sure you've heard a presentation on that. But at its peak, the waterfront will have about 3,000 residential units. It will have 1 million square feet of office and about 400,000 square feet of retail. So it's, and right now there's 6 projects going, so it's more of a reality than it was 2 years ago. This is the ports, and I won't steal her thunder because I'm sure she's already presented it to you, but this is the master plan for the port and what they're doing adjacent to the Graymore. So this is immediately next to the bridge, and I'm not even going to get into the bridge because that's a hot topic, and we need a new bridge. We need a new bridge. But you get me on that platform, I won't shut up for half an hour. So anyway, this is essentially 4 to 5 blocks that will be alongside the river, and some exciting things happening there. They're working with 2 prominent developers. One is a hotel operator, and another one is a residential developer that is, I won't name him by name, but you're all familiar with him. He's done some great things up and down the West Coast. So these are the 2 restaurant buildings that are currently under construction. They have 3 tenants signed. They have room for 1 more. And this is alongside the Grant Street Pier. And so these two restaurant buildings will be completed within about 6-7 months. This is another building the Angelos are doing on Mill Plain. It's a 36,000 square foot office building. This is a project that Killian has planned. In the lower left-hand corner is the library. The library was built. The other 3 blocks are currently being considered for development. This is adjacent to I-5 and Evergreen, which Evergreen crosses over I-5. The interesting about this is the city is currently working with the Killians on putting underground parking, because I mentioned earlier that Clark County, or actually the state, doesn't have tax increment financing. What they do have is a pilot project called LIFT, Local Improvement something or other. And what that did is provided monies on an annual basis for parking here. So what they're proceeding with is parking is becoming in high demand. So they're looking at doing about 370 stalls here in a structured or underground facility, and then the buildings would rise above that. This is another one on the waterfront. This is the Indigo, which is by Dean Kirkland, and this was in the planning process. Another hotel, and it would have 3 restaurants in it. Beautiful project. And then, before I get into up there, on basically a couple of other things that are happening in downtown Vancouver that I don't have slides for, but there is a block that's called the Academy, and if you're familiar with that, it was built by the Sisters of Providence, and it was the first hospital in the Northwest Territories. Matter of fact, it became Providence Health System, so that's another thing of pride with Vancouverites, because that's where Providence Health Systems were born. So anyway, there's the trust, Fort Vancouver Trust, recently acquired that property, and our master planning with the help of Sarah. And I had a visual for that, and I didn't get into the slide, so I apologize. But there's 3 blocks around it, and so there's a Minnesota developer right now who is looking to develop all of those into multifamily. So that would be about another 340 units that would be added to the Vancouver market. In addition, Clyde Holland with Holland Residential on the Vancouver Center. I talked earlier about the Saudi interest that had come in and built next to Esther Short Park. Well, they built 3 of their towers, did not the 4th, and we won't get into all the reasons why they're not proceeding with the 4th, but Clyde Holland is now going to develop a 10-story building there, of which he'll occupy 5 for his office, and then the other 5 will be residential, and that's kitty corner to the Hilton. Other things that are happening in downtown is we've got 2 buildings on Main Street that we're purchasing and remodeling, former JCPenney building and then a former theater into kind of creative office space, and then retail on the ground floor. Mark Madden has come in and very quietly developed 5 projects that, even though they're relatively small at 36 to 48 units, when you add it up, it's a couple hundred units. And he's done that in smaller projects throughout the city. And then Skip, he has developed, with GSL, he has developed, I think, 230 units affordable housing. So you can see a lot of things happening in downtown Vancouver. A lot of employers now are starting to look at the market. They're attracted by the fact that now that there's more opportunities to live, the rents are less expensive, which, not good for us as developers, but. And then this is worthy of mention. This is in North Clark County, and I don't know if any of you have been here, but this is a new casino that was built along I-5 in the center. Very controversial, but it's there, it's built. It's about 500,000 square feet. But what they did is they partnered with a group out of New York, a tribe out of New York, and they delivered a product here that is unlike any, I think, Native American casino that you're familiar with in the Pacific Northwest. It is a very beautiful facility. I'm not a gambler, but I do think it's an attractive project. And so they're also building out right now a theater that accommodates 2,500 people. And then eventually they'll have a hotel. They'll have about 400 rooms. So this is a big deal for North Clark County, and it will spur a lot of development around it. I don't know that I have anything else. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed it. This is another project downtown Vancouver, which is Heroes Place. It's 100 units by Prestige, Elie Kassab, and it's currently being built. And I'll get into this in just a moment. But let me talk briefly about, what makes Clark County so special. And I think there's a host of things. There's a lot of activity happening, and some of you may be familiar with this, may not be, but there's an amphitheater there that Epitel recently did not have that many attractions, maybe 8 to 10 a year. But as the music industry has found less and less money in music sales, they've started increasing their tours. And so this amphitheater, which seats about 17,000, has gone from maybe 8 to 10 attractions a year to 24 to 30. And so that's a massive influx of capital into that particular market. There's also the not the Civic Center. What do you call it? The Expo Center that's attached to it. Again, that's starting to grow in popularity. I got the casino. You got the wildlife refuge. Now, this is interesting. I didn't realize this. This wildlife refuge is very unique in that there's only like 3 places in the entire world that has these type of flora and fauna where it all comes together because of the convergence of all the rivers around here. And it's a 5,000-acre complex. And surprisingly, there's over 250,000 visitors a year that go there. Now, Fort Vancouver, which is historical trust, there's over 1 million visitors per year. Now, granted, maybe mostly kids, but nonetheless, it's 1 million visitors. And then so it's an attractive place for a lot of people to be, relocating their jobs. Schools, K through 12, nationally recognized. So that's a big attraction for a lot of people that are moving into the area. So this project is near and dear to my heart because I have had some involvement in wineries in the past, and I have other partners who are wine enthusiasts. And so in Woodland, which is just across, literally just on the opposite side of the Lewis River from Clark County, right next to the freeway, and I might add that I-5 also through this section has about 90 to 100,000 cars per day. So there's a lot of people going between Seattle and Portland, more so than there is south of Portland towards Eugene. And so we're building this, and we have 8 wineries, so it'll be a wine destination place along the banks of the Lewis River. So there'll be dining options alongside. We have bistro restaurants, coffee, and wineries, and a lot of Walla Walla wineries and East Washington wineries, which are considered more kind of old world, classic reds and so forth, are locating here, so it gives them exposure to the Portland market. So you're going to see a lot more, I think, Portlanders coming up for this experience too, because we'll ultimately have 12 to 14 wineries, but like Woodinville, it'll probably grow to many more. And I think, as far as, I'm sorry, I'm remiss. Here's another project I think that I referred to. This is the Academy, and this is where the Sisters of Providence was created. And then you can see the blocks that Sarah has designed around it. And those are currently being optioned by a Minnesota developer. So that's kind of it. I mean, I could go into the residential as far as outside of the apartments. There's obviously, like I said, a lot of available land in comparison to this side of the river. There's a recent project, Green Mountain, which is just north of Camas, which was approved, and it's over 1,700 lots just for single family. There's apartments, several thousand apartments that can go there, and also retail. And so that's going to see a lot more movement out towards Camas and Lackamas Shores. And I think that's kind of it. I mean, I just wanted to kind of give you a snapshot of what things are happening, but I know you'll have questions that maybe I didn't address, and so that's maybe we can get into the meat of the matter. So with that, I thank you for listening, and I'll open it up to questions, and hopefully I can answer them. Yes.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. Looks like you have a little bit of Vancouver. Are you concerned with overbuilding?
No, and I'm not. And I'll tell you why. There's kind of a story, I'll share like a 3-second or 30-second story, and then I'll get into the why. Is pretty much my entire career has been on finding things that are on the periphery. I kind of refer to as hunting at the edge of the pack, and I could jump into the Pearl District, but I just don't care to duke it out, with institutional developers and lenders. So what we typically do is look for markets. It's kind of like surfing, kind of like finding that perfect wave that, you can see it starting to swell, but, it just hasn't hit yet. You get in, get the infrastructure, and then you can ride it. And that's what we identified with Vancouver. We saw where it was going to go. And so in anticipation of that, we got several projects under wraps and approved. And we ourselves are delivering about 350 units. And so I called CBRE, Colliers, HFF, and I asked them, okay, what can we absorb here in downtown? Now, and I'll get into the entire county, but what can we absorb downtown without any issues, without really affecting the vacancy bubble? And the answer was over the next 18 to 24 months, 1,500 units, and then 2,500 units over the next 3 to 5 years. Now, given the fact that these bigger projects take 2 years to get through design and entitlement, and then 2 years to build and absorb, so we clearly are, and that's keeping it at the current vacancy. The demand is so high. So if they can bring additional units in, could possibly get to 3%, but I still think we're a far cry from getting 3.5% to 5%. Now, there are a ton of units being delivered on the east side. I particularly don't do a lot of suburban multifamily because urban has had a 24 year trajectory that has just been like this in rents and occupancies. Multifamily has been a roller coaster. I've owned properties that are in the suburbs, but it's all basically when people are buying homes, when they're leaving for jobs and hiring, and it's not a lifestyle. So there's about 2,500 units that are being planned on the east side. I do believe vacancy rates will increase there beyond probably 5%. I think the demand is there, and I think it'll flatten out and absorb it. But I think for the next 3 years, that's a lot of units coming online. So hopefully that answered. Yeah.
So do you see the draw in more people coming to town, staying over there and working, or do you see them being drawn from downtown Portland over to Vancouver because of pricing? And if so, 800-pound gorilla is transportation. I mean, are you guys looking at support rail going into Vancouver, or how's that all working out?
So, yeah.
That's only about 5 questions.
Well, I'll do my best. I am a proponent of a new bridge. One span was built in 1917, and the other one was built in 1950s. And so, and I think we had a golden egg when the federal government was going to give us $2 billion for, with the stipulation you had to have light rail. But there was unfortunately some mass hysteria. There was misinformation that was shared, and it went down in flames, and we've lost that opportunity. Now we're trying to find the funds to do this. I think it's beyond us. It's a federal law. I mean, Interstate I-5 carries a heck of a lot of freight, a lot, and it has a military benefit as well. And so I think the feds need to get back on board with this. But anyway, that's my 2 cents. The other thing is, can Vancouver survive with or without it? Yeah, I think it's better for it, but it's doing fine all by itself. Now, there's over 60 to 70,000 people in Clark County that commute to Portland on a daily basis, and the infrastructure has not been improved to accommodate that. And so I think light rail would help. Wider bridge would help. And what's interesting about this bridge is most people thought it was just a new bridge, but the improvements actually started SR 500 a couple miles to the north all the way through Delta Park. So it was a massive project to provide 4 to 6 lanes of traffic on each side and kind of get rid of that jam. So anyway, I'm a proponent of it. I'm on several committees to try and find that funding and working with state senators and so forth. As far as I think there's becoming more of an attraction to people living on that side and working on that side because they don't have to commute. That they can find a place there. And what's interesting is there's a new concept called WeWork, and I don't know if you're familiar with that, but WeWork is a great concept where you actually have it's almost like a club that you join, and they have office space. You're guaranteed some place to put your laptop or have some privacy for your cell phone, and I think there's a lot of individuals who commute to Portland, and if the traffic's just too bad, you pull off, you go to the We office, and you just do your work there until either the traffic lightens up or you head home. And so we're starting to see a movement. BMW is looking at doing their car program in downtown Vancouver, and so creating a fleet, and we'll be meeting with them shortly to discuss that. So did I answer all your questions? Okay, so, yeah. Yes. Oh, yeah.
Please repeat the question.
Hi, do you know anything about the current vacant or larger vacant previous HP campus, the main industrial building, like over 200,000 square feet, and then recent also vacant by a Japanese company. So do you know anything, what's the plan, absorption on, the city on that?
Not really. There's a lot of speculation. Nike actually looked at that because Nike was expanding their operations. Adidas looked at it because they were expanding their operations. Adidas just leased 80,000 square feet in Montgomery Park, so that's off the table. HP has actually been talking about, building their inventory and their employees back. So there's a lot of speculation, nothing concrete right now. There are a couple high-tech companies that I have heard, one from, they're both Japanese, but one from Texas and one in Irvine, that have been looking at it. But again, nothing's been announced, and what I'm hearing is just hearsay. So I don't have anything. It is a big space, but it's also a little obsolete for a lot of what people want now too. It's not that creative environment that a lot of people are looking for. Yeah. Now, to that point, though, SEH has expanded, WaferTech has expanded, and then I can never say this. Is it Kyocera? Kyocera. They've expanded as well. So there are high-tech companies on Sharp, that are expanding in the Vancouver area. So.
Anybody else?
Okay, I made it. So I'm going to get a throat lozenge, and I thank you for your time. Yeah.